made it to Minneapolis Airport, and it's about 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're about an hour away from our flight yet. Actually, 2 hours away from our flight yet, and yeah, we made it here, and we're gonna meet up with his Navy buddy and an officer from his ship from back in the 60s, and so that's exciting. I'm looking forward to falling asleep. I'm very tired already. We got up at Joy's and Ben's probably an hour earlier than we should have, but I'm glad we're here and we're settled in, so it's gonna be a great day. We're in Boston, and we're about to go meet our Navy buddies. Yep. We're gonna go get the car first. Anything you're looking forward to, excited about, etc.?
Nice to see Tony in Austin. Beautiful weather.
Yeah, it's beautiful here.
Smooth ride.
Got in at about 11 o'clock, and yeah, we're gonna go find a place to go eat with them. So they picked out the restaurant. Now we're gonna hop on a bus. So we shall see how that goes. Hi, Tony. Yeah.
How you doing? I'm Austin.
Mr. B or
I'm Austin.
Oh, Austin. Nice to meet you. Sorry.
Somehow, you know, this is pretty much the whole family. I've got my daughter.
Wow.
That's my oldest son, Gus. My grand.
Yep.
It's been a good day so far. What highlights for you, Dad?
Well, I think meeting Tony and Austin at the restaurant was cool.
Yep,
Brought
and
back old memories.
Tony and Austin are old Navy buddies that you haven't seen for how many years?
54.
54 years. So today was kind of a great time with them. We spent a couple hours eating at a restaurant in
Telling stories.
what was that, in Burlington?
Burlington.
Was it Burlington, Massachusetts?
I think so.
Yep. So, and now we're off to see Martha's Vineyard to do some genealogy and check out the island. So it should be a good time. One, two, three. What do we have to see, Dad?
43 cars coming off.
Do you have a prediction?
50.
50.
48. What is that? 45? What did I say? I lost track. What was that? 44? 45?
All right, our first stop on day one, really, of our time here on Martha's Vineyard. We're gonna go check out the gravesite of Governor Thomas Mayhew, who is buried at Tisbury Village Cemetery, which is about 5 minutes away. Nope.
So we've got two documents that we're
Okay.
sure have the elder Thomas Mayhew's signature on it. That one from 1667
Wow. That is cool.
is a deed in which, well, here, let me,
Yeah.
I can
Sure.
show you one better
Yeah.
because we've got a transcript of
Okay.
it.
Perfect.
Adorned with a stamp
nice.
of Abraham Lincoln for some reason.
Ah.
It's beyond me.
Yes.
Um,
So, be it known unto all men by these presents that I, Thomas Mayhew of the Vineyard, do for myself, my heirs, my assignees, hereby grant unto Richard Sarson, John Eady, John Pease, James Pease, and John G., their heirs, executors, and assignees, so such right in all that the land that is claimed by Thomas Layton and Peter Talman of Rhode Island, near
Holmes's Hole, which is to say the
okay.
harbor
His hole.
outside the window.
Okay,
Here.
all right. Upon the vineyard, I say, I do hereby grant unto the said Richard Sarson, John Eady, John Pease, and so forth, to every one of them 1/6 part of ye said land. Okay, so he was dividing up the land.
Yeah, and
For them and their heirs to enjoy for their forever, reserving 1/6 part thereof to myself, my heirs and assignees forever. Oh, that's cool. What's the history there? Do you know? So how
I
did?
do. Mayhew in 1641 decided that he wanted to establish himself and his followers on Martha's Vineyard. So he bought the settlement rights from the two aristocrats back in England, Sir Ferdinando Gorges and the Earl of Stirling, who each thought they'd been granted the settlement rights by the king.
Yeah.
Mayhew, taking no chances, paid them both for the settlement rights and said, right, like clearing the title to a car or a house,
Yeah.
and said, right, the settlement rights, not the land itself. The land still belongs to the king, but the settlement rights, the right to establish a colony and to set up a town and whatnot, belongs now to Mayhew. So Mayhew establishes himself on the east end of the island, what's now Edgartown, what he called Great Harbor. And in time, in the 1660s, people who came to the vineyard with him start setting up housekeeping with his blessing in what's now West Tisbury and what's now Vineyard Haven. And lo and behold, here are these two clowns from Rhode Island who are there, and without Mayhew's say-so, have started their own little settlement on the shores of Holmes Hole, or in what's now called Hustleton's Head. So Mayhew, in effect, evicts them and takes over their land and parcels it out among the people named among the 5 people named in this deed. Each of them get 1/6 of it, and he reserves a 1/6 share of it for himself. And that's what that deed is doing. And if you want a clearer explanation of it than that, Charles Banks, in his History of Martha's Vineyard, Volume 1, has a brief, like a page or two, discussion of the incident.
Okay.
But this is the legal outcome, and this is why he's invoking the rights given to me by the Earl of Stirling and Sir Ferdinando Gorges. Basically, that's him reiterating, this is my island.
Yeah.
You guys didn't have the right to be there without getting my approval, so off you go back to Rhode Island. And as is my right, I'm going to hand out this land to my 5 buddies and keep a piece for myself.
So prior to him kind of coming into the land, if you will, Mayhew, what is your knowledge, or what do you know about? My understanding is that he was sort of struggling before, like financially. He wasn't, he was looking to get out of debt, perhaps. Do you know anything about that?
So Mayhew of course, was born in England, in Tisbury in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
He went to London. He apprenticed to a mercer, a cloth merchant. He did well enough for himself that he was given the opportunity to come to America with Winthrop's fleet in 1630 on behalf of someone in London who wanted to get a foothold in the New World. He did well enough for himself in Boston that he made some money. He moved to Watertown outside of Boston. And then, although I don't have the details in my mind, Kay Mayhew's 2014 article about the early Mayhews goes into what happened in Watertown.
Okay.
He got into a bit of trouble with, what's the word I want? Running afoul of somebody with more money and influence than he did.
Sure.
And decided that it might be better to pursue his future somewhere else. He clearly had the money to pay off Sterling and Gorges for their settlement rights. I don't know, again, offhand, because the early Mayhews aren't my particular area of focus. I don't know how much he paid them, but they clearly weren't going to say, "Oh yeah, Tom, go ahead, give us 2 shillings and a goat or something like that, and there you go."
Yeah.
Also, it's clear from his subsequent behavior that Mayhew was enacting that great 17th century English story where he's an up-and-coming, ambitious man. And he knows, because he grew up in 17th century England, that land is power, land is wealth, land is prestige. The difference between him and an ambitious young cloth merchant and, say, the Earl of Stirling or Sir Ferdinando Gorges is A, they've got titles and he doesn't, and B, they've got land and he doesn't. Now, getting a hold of land in 17th century England, short of marrying into a titled or land-holding family, or making such an insanely large amount of money in trade that you could basically buy your way into the aristocracy, was a challenge, because the thing about land is, especially in England in the 1630s and 40s, they're not making any more of it. And every part of the island is already owned by somebody. So Mayhew, once he's on this side of the Atlantic, starts looking to the fringes of the civilized world and going, where is there land that's not owned by anybody English? And settles on Martha's Vineyard. The settlement rights have been granted, but they haven't been exploited. So he goes, right, this is a place where I can turn money into land. And what he's looking for, it becomes apparent from the way he runs things during the rest of his life, the last 40 years of his life while he's here, is the opportunity to be the big cheese, the opportunity to be on a small scale, like the Earl of Stirling, or if you're a Downton Abbey fan, like Lord Grantham there, who, when he walks through the village, all the farmers and tradesmen sort of touch their caps to him and say, "Oh, hello, your lordship, lovely day, isn't it?" And, defer to him and treat him like he's the big guy on the block, because, well, he is. And so when he comes to the vineyard, he treats the business of setting up a settlement, setting up a town, parceling out land to people as his and his alone to do. He is absolutely firm that, at the risk of being ever so slightly blasphemous, I am the way, the truth, and the light. Nobody comes to land on Martha's Vineyard but through me. Which is why the 2 guys from Rhode Island and Usselton get his back up so much, because if he lets their settlement stand, then, like failing to protect your trademark, the next thing you know, everybody's calling adhesive bandages Band-Aids or acetylsalicylic acid aspirin, even though those were originally trade names. So Mayhew, when he's doing deals with the Wampanoag, hey, I'll give you this much money, whatever else, for this piece of land, he insists on him always being the person who negotiates the deals with the Wampanoag sachem, and who then turns around and says, right, I've acquired this enormous chunk of pasture land outside of Great Harbor. I'll divide it up into 25 sections, and I'll take this one, and the other 24 of you can draw lots, and whoever draws lot number 2 can have their pick of what's next. Whoever draws lot number 25 gets whatever the last one is.
Yeah.
And Banks in Volume 1 goes through endless versions of, and Mayhew bought this, and he divided it up among these people, and he gave a half share to these other people. And it's both incredibly useful if you're trying to track the history of a particular piece of property, and incredibly tedious if you just want a good story, but there it is.
Yeah.
So that's Mayhew's story down to for about the first 30 years on the island, 1641 to 1671. Technically, the island is part of the colony of New York, but New York City is a long way away at the tip of Manhattan. And so 1671, a letter shows up from Fort James and Governor Francis Lovelace saying, I say, Mayhew, would you come to Fort James? I have some things we need to discuss. And Mayhew's like, we imagine, oh crap. The head office called. And I've had free reign for 30 years, and now they want to tell me how to do things. July 1671. I'm basically a 19th century historian.
I get it.
Sometimes
That's all I do
up in
too.
the wrong century.
You're good.
July 1671, Mayhew and his grandson Matthew, who's by this point his chief lieutenant, goes off to Fort James in what's now Lower Manhattan. Lovelace is there in his long curly wig and his 17th century hat and the whole 9 yards, looking honestly like he just stepped out of a road company production of the Three Musketeers. And Lovelace and the Mayhews meet, and thankfully, from Mayhew's point of view, Lovelace, by and large, isn't going to lower the boom on him. He is all about, well done, Mayhew, excellent job representing all things English there in the tail end of reality on Martha's Vineyard. Here, I have for you royal charters for Great Harbor. And Mayhew, with his eye on the main chant, says, hey, let's call it Edgartown, because James II, the heir to the throne, has a young son named Edgar, and then when he ascends to the throne, Edgar will be the heir apparent, and James will look favorably upon having named a town after his son. Doesn't work out. Edgar dies before his 7th birthday, at which point the vogue for naming things after Edgar completely evaporates, which is why Edgartown, as far as we know, is unique in the entire world in having that name, which makes it easy to Google, unlike Springfield. Lovelace also gives Mayhew a charter for the town of Tisbury. That's basically the center of the island, which is present-day Tisbury, which we're now standing in, and present-day West Tisbury, the next town, no surprise, west of us. The center of Tisbury in those days was what's now West Tisbury Village, and Holmes Hole, here where we're standing now, was a rinky-dink village with about 6 white people in it, and it wasn't the end of the world from Mayhew's point of view, but you could see it from here. When Isaac Chase, who was a Quaker from Northampton, showed up with a couple of other guys who Mayhew thought were a little sketchy, he said, well, you can settle in Holmes Hole, but we're not interested in having you in Great Harbor here. I mean, Holmes Hole was where you sent people you didn't want to have to deal with in those days. For all I know, Edgartown still thinks that way about us. In any event, so Mayhew's now got a charter for Great Harbor, newly named Edgartown, a charter for Tisbury, and the western third of the island is granted to him by Lovelace as the Manor of Tisbury, Manor.
Yeah.
Not a town, more like, right, Mayhew, this is your private preserve. 20 odd years on, it becomes incorporated as Chilmark, named after the town next to the town where Mayhew grew up. But basically in 1671, Lovelace has reaffirmed, yes, Mayhew, this is your island, 2 officially incorporated towns and this other bit that's also yours. Also, I, Governor Lovelace, will grant you the title of Governor for Life of Martha's Vineyard. You know how when some incredibly successful and accomplished actor gets to be like 85 and the Academy looks around and goes, crap, we've never given this guy a Best Actor Oscar. Paul Newman, Peter O'Toole. What do? You give them a Lifetime Achievement Award. It's like, yeah, for whatever reason, you gave all these great performances and never got recognized for it, but yes, you are amazing. We tip our hat to you. Have a consolation prize. This is basically what Governor for Life is. It doesn't give him any more power than he already has. It doesn't give him any more authority than he already has. He's still answerable to the governor in New York. He's still the big cheese as far as everybody on the island is concerned, which for some people on the island, like Simon Atherton of Tisbury, is an increasing bone of contention, because as he gets older and more confident, Mayhew's acting more and more like the lord of the manor and less like the head of the colonized Martha's Vineyard venture, and people like Atherton, who are now being asked to pay rent on land that they thought they'd been given, are getting annoyed at Mayhew's, what's the word I want, sense of his own importance. So Lovelace sort of faints in that direction. He says, well, Mayhew, I should like that you would appoint a council of advisors to help you govern. Now, on the one hand, that's like, dude, your diplomatic skills are not what they might be. Maybe like share power a little bit and quit being quite so much the King Charles 2.0. In practice, and honestly, Lovelace probably anticipates this, in practice, what does Mayhew do? He appoints a council of advisors, and their names are Mayhew, friend of Mayhew, longtime employee of Mayhew, and Smith.
Right.
Poor Smith gets outvoted all the time, and Mayhew continues to do what he wants. So it doesn't actually expand Mayhew's authority. In principle, it might contract it a little bit, but in practice, not really. But notice the for life bit. This is Lovelace looking over old man Mayhew's shoulder at Matthew Mayhew, 20-something, as ambitious as his grandfather, and saying, you whippersnapper, don't think that you're going to inherit the level of power that the old man has when the old man's gone. This is governor for life, and by this point, the old man is pushing 80, and although living into your 80s was not uncommon in the 17th century. I mean, it's the old Bill Gates and 99 broke college students in a room still have a net worth of X. The same averaging of a net worth in the 7 figures or something. The same averaging effect makes the average life expectancy in the 17th century look abysmal, like 45. But in point of fact, if you live past age 5 or age 10, or if you're a woman, if you make it past childbearing age without dying, your chances of living into your 70s, 80s, even 90s are great. So Thomas Mayhew, pushing 80, is governor for life, but life is not going to be all that much longer. And Lovelace figures, he's on the back end of beyond. What bother is he going to be to me? Make the old man happy.
Yeah.
So that's where the governor for life thing comes. This, by the way, is a reproduction, a facsimile reproduction of the thing that Lovelace handed Mayhew at Fort James in 1671.
Okay. Oh, very nice.
Why the reproduction is printed on something that looks like faux silk that's been starched.
Yeah.
No clue. So that takes us down to 1671. Thomas Mayhew lives another 12 years, and this document, you can see the difference in the signature. It's much more crabbed, much more shaky. He's clearly at this point 1681, 82. He'll die in 1683. At this point in 1681, 1682, he's an old man. He knows his days are numbered. And having built, as he sees it, this large and prosperous outpost of England on the shores of the New World, he's looking forward to his legacy. And in this document, he's passing on to his grandson Matthew, now 10 plus years older, actually just about 10 years older. This is just about shade over a decade since the Fort James Conference and the charters and so forth. This is Thomas Sr. looking at Matthew and going, have my house, have my home lot, the one I picked out for myself way back in 1641 when we were standing on the sand at Great Harbor with a map spread out of the land I just bought from the sachem. And it's also him implicitly saying, boy, you are in charge now. You are the head of the family. Yes, your sister Hannah, who I've been letting behave as if she were a man in terms of doing land deals by herself and taking her advice on civic matters and so on and so forth, is out there with husband number 2, husband number 1 having died, doing her Hannah thing, but you are my heir apparent, even though you don't inherit the title of governor. And Matthew steps into his grandfather's shoes at this point, probably actually in practice before this point, and takes over Thomas Sr.'s role as the preeminent civic authority, not directly judicial authority, although Matthew does hold positions in the legal hierarchy. I think he's justice of the peace at one point, clerk of courts, God knows what else. So Matthew becomes, and his sons and cousins like Payne Mayhew become after him, as Thomas Sr. was, massively important cogs in the municipal and judicial machinery of particularly Edgartown, but more broadly the island as a whole. Just as Matthew's father, Thomas Jr., and various other descendants through Thomas Jr., Reverend John Mayhew up in Chilmar, John's son Experience's son, I believe it is Zachariah, become the public face for multiple generations of the Mayhews' other family business, which is bringing Christianity to the Wampanoag.
Yeah.
So one coda to the whole Matthew Mayhew thing. For whatever reason, years ending in 1 figure prominently in the story of the 17th century Mayhews. The Vineyard colonial enterprise begins with the buying up of the settlement rights in 1641. the conference with Governor Lovelace at Fort James and the charters for Tisbury and Edgartown are 1671. Thomas Sr. signs over the home lot and house to Matthew in 1681. And in 1691, Matthew's life becomes, in his view, a lot less fun because in the tidying up of things in the New World that followed the glorious revolution of 1688-89 in England, where in essence Parliament looked at James II and said, we are done having Catholics on the throne. His sister Mary married some Dutchman. Maybe we can invite them over. They're good Protestants. Invite them over to rule jointly over England and boot James II out. Which, when you think about it, just from a purely governmental point of view in the late 17th century, is a pretty cocky thing for Parliament to do. But leaving that aside, so 1691, they're cleaning up the loose ends of this on the other side of the Atlantic, and the Vineyard, long story short, gets transferred from the colony of New York to the colony of Massachusetts Bay, which honestly makes infinitely more sense. I mean, yes, the original thought had been, all those islandy bits along the south coast of New England can be part of New York because, well, Long Island clearly belongs as part of New York. And if we're going to include Long Island, we might as well throw in Block Island, the Elizabeth Islands, No Man's Land, Martha's Vineyard, and what the heck, Nantucket too. So all of that initially starts out as New York. Eventually in 1691, the Vineyard, the Elizabeths get peeled off and added to Massachusetts Bay. The governor of Massachusetts Bay says, right, here in Massachusetts Bay, we have town meetings to determine what happens in municipal government. Make it so, Mr. Mayhew. And Mr. Mayhew goes, well, shoot, it was more fun being part of New York when Grandpa got to be the lord of the manor and nobody gave him nonsense about town meetings and this democracy thing.
Right.
Honestly, you let Parliament throw out a perfectly good king and bring in a couple of Dutch people to rule England, and the whole world just unravels on you. But in all seriousness, 1691 brings that first chapter of the Mayhew story on the Vineyard to a close. The chapter where the Vineyard is basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the Mayhew family, and the Mayhews are the unquestioned authority. They remain significant figures in the Vineyard down through the 18th, 19th century, right down to today. You see the name all over the island. There are still lineal descendants of the Mayhews running around. Allie's General Store was originally S.M. Mayhew and Company, run by a couple of brothers who were direct descendants of Thomas Sr. The schoolhouse at the upper end of Main Street in Vineyard Haven, which is easy to recognize because it has a flagpole in front of it that was cut off about 10 feet above the ground last month. Apparently the top was rotted and the power company was afraid it was going to come down on the power lines. But that schoolhouse was built in, I want to say, the 1820s by yet another member of under the direction of yet another member of the Mayhew family, who was an early schoolmaster in Vineyard Haven. And there were Mayhews who were whaling captains, there were Mayhews who were bankers, there were Mayhews who were all over the place. But the Mayhew era, when religion, law, government, commerce, education were all under the umbrella of the Mayhew family, is basically ended by 1700. The one place where they retain the unquestioned, we are the first family of Martha's Vineyard status is in the missionary business, where the Mayhews remain the driving force down through probably the Revolution.